2020. What an absolute shithole of a year it's been. I think we all know it's been a bad one when I decided to go to YouTube again to rant about all my feelings. Can embarrassing yourself on the internet be a healthy coping mechanism? Let's hope so, because it doesn't seem like life is doing me many favours recently. Basically, we started getting high and talking about passive aggressive behaviour. So, if I can remember what I'm saying, that'd be great. However, if it starts to not make sense, please bear with me, because it ain't easy. So, passive aggressive behaviour and how to notice it. Let's go. Right, so passive aggression basically stems from not being able to communicate assertively with how you're feeling, and if something upsets you, you basically just can't communicate it very well using your words, or lack of, or wrong words are being used. And is often received negatively by other people, and it can become like extremely frustrating, especially if you don't recognise it as passive aggressive behaviour and or know how to deal with it. So the people who are passive aggressive 9 times out of 10 in this behaviour, you will notice things like they'll have a difficulty with saying no, they'll have difficulty putting boundaries in place, they'll struggle to give like controversial feedback, or if they do give feedback, it will be controversial and with pretty much little to no compromise at all. They're disliked by others a lot. They have a lot of difficulty with handling. They have a lot of difficulty with handling conflict, and they'll lose other people's approval, or they have difficulty with coping with losing other people's approval. So basically, it's a form of communication where the person will seem to be passive, specifically about a topic usually, but they are in fact angry and not passive. The anger that is involved in passive aggression is often expressed in indirect ways, or they'll just shut down altogether, like nobody's home. Is there any sign of intelligent life anywhere? So as an example, let's just say you ask your partner to do something, or you ask your friend to do something, or you ask a family member to do something. It could be anyone. Anyone. Could be a fucking next door neighbour. So if you ask them to do something and they don't want to do it, rather than say they don't want to do it, they'll just decide not to speak to you for like 3 days, or hardly speak to you at all. There's like different examples of passive aggression. It does vary from person to person, but they're really common, and most of the time people won't even recognise that they're doing it, which is insane. But maybe you do it too, so you can thank me later. So some of these, just as examples, are sulking. So that could be like they're not even fully engaged with the relationship or friendship. They'll just be giving you short answers, you know, just typical signs of sulking really. Or like, you know, being completely withdrawn and the communication is just little to nothing. The silent treatment is another one, which is psychologically to a lot of people the most damaging, because it, even though it might only be that one person that's ignoring you, it feels like that is anything that matters, the fact that this person won't talk to you, and it's psychological warfare. So typically, so to speak, the silent treatment is pretty self-explanatory. So they're just not answering your calls, texts, or they're just refusing to talk to you at all. Like maybe they're just hardly replying, but they might refuse to talk to you at all. They might even block you. Cushion wisdom. That is literally what I am. I'm like that fucking Tumblr page, you know, but like personified. I sort of reached 24 and I've become a living, breathing Tumblr page. Anyway, I was getting back to like what passive aggression is, you know, that's what I'm talking about. They'll also throw mild insults at you, which could be anything to them, just picking on your insecurities, or I suppose to some degree calling you an outright sket or something. I don't know, I'd be a bit offended if someone called me a sket mid-argument. I'd be offended. The other form is like gossiping, so they'll actively just go around degrading you because that's how they want to process how they're feeling. And while I get that people have coping mechanisms, like, come on, man. Are we like 12? They just make derogatory comments behind your back. The other thing that people do is they'll procrastinate and make mistakes purposely to annoy the person that they're angry with as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to get my own back on you, but I'm not going to tell you what you did. So just deal with it. So how do we cope with passive aggression? How do we like help people recognise that they're being passive aggressive? It can be tricky and challenging to like cope with. It's not nice. I know that because I've dealt with people like it, but I'm also aware that I do it myself, which is good because now I can sort of like stop myself and I'm like, yeah man, you did that. That's growth. Fair play. So when someone's being passive aggressive and they're being like hostile towards you, which it is, it's a form of hostility, and they're like refusing to like withhold like assertive conversation, actually really get to the root of the problem. This might actually be due to their fear of rejection or upsetting you or just avoiding any potential confrontation or conflict to begin with, but it completely depends. Rather than have the assertive conversation, what they'll tend to do is they'll be critical of you and they'll project their insecurities onto you. So something that they're feeling inside, they're then sort of blaming you for because they're too insecure to admit, okay, this is my insecurity, this is something that I have to deal with. They would rather just blame it on someone else. And what they'll do is they'll withdraw their energy from you and like attempt to hurt you in underhand ways. On the bottom line of all this, the best thing you can do in that situation is simply call them out on their behaviour. That is literally one of the only things you can do. But I'll tell you how to go about it. Don't do it in a judgmental way. It's not good. It won't help. It will only offend them more and draw them to the conclusion that they just have to continue being passive. It's like a form of like punishment that you shouldn't be getting, but you are. And it's important to understand we cannot control the response. That is something we have to take responsibility for and go, okay, I've called them out now. I can't control the response I'm gonna get. I'm gonna leave. So when you're having this conversation on calling them out for their behaviour, you need to identify how they've been and tell them how they've been. Have they been sulking? Have they been withdrawn? Have they been gossiping? Or are they in complete denial of the whole situation? The only other thing you can do in a non-judgmental way is share your experience of what's happening. So share your side of the story. For an example, let's just say you go, you've been very withdrawn, or you've been this way since we had this conversation, or since this happened. Could you just like elaborate on why that is and like try and get a response that way? There's like a few different responses that they can give from this, but I'll just point a few out so you're aware. So some of their responses are like denial. If they completely deny how they've been, how they've acted, you need to like step away at that point. There is no point even trying to fix that or try and work that out at that moment in time. You need to take that step back and give this person space, because maybe they need more time to like process it, maybe need time to think about it, calm down. Sometimes logic in a situation takes time for people. If they act out in aggression, you need to at that point set some boundaries. Whether that be you have to walk away, or you have to sit down and go, look, this needs to stop, or we can't continue this friendship, can't continue this relationship. And at that point, boundaries need to be set. If that can't be adhered to at that point, you need to like really think about whether it's time to go. The other one is open communication. That might actually happen. You might actually get an answer. You might actually get an intelligent conversation, which is full of so much compromise and understanding, and that is great. And I'm happy if you get that, and it'll strengthen your relationship and intimacy after it's been concluded. If after all of that the silent treatment continues, or it just continues anyway, you need to then question your self-worth and really think about if you want to continue putting yourself through this cycle, because it can be really traumatic for people, especially if they're insecure about people leaving or have abandonment issues or something themselves. So yeah, at that point you kind of need to go, is this really worth it anymore? Yeah, so just keep that in mind, because that's a red flag, and that probably won't ever stop. Ever. So yeah, it's important to remember you can't help everybody. Like, it is impossible to help everybody. You can't do it. Don't stretch yourself that far, because you'll eventually just not have time for yourself, and that's when you end up feeling a bit loose. Yeah. So if you've like listened to this and go, okay, I'm guilty, I might do a few of these things, let me tell you how you can deal with them if you are recognising these things in yourself. If you found yourself being passive aggressive, the first step is to be clear with yourself why you are upset. You need to put that shit down and go, this is why I'm upset. Recognise it, acknowledge it, embrace it. Write down exactly what it is, and don't be vague. Be completely fluid and honest with the answer. Take some time to reflect on the issue from the other person's perspective in that situation. Listen to how they might be feeling. Like, are they feeling heard in this situation, or are you just blocking it out? Really take time to see it from the other person's perspective, because it can actually make the situation a lot more whole and less chaos, because there's things filling the parts in between rather than you just making up this whole scenario in your own head. So how do people get to this point where that is their reaction to scenarios and how they handle it? Most passive aggressive people have learnt the behaviour from a parent or both parents. It begins in early life, because that is essentially what they learn to do in a reaction to certain scenarios. One of the main reasons for it is conflict avoidance. They feel like it's easier to let the person know that they're annoyed or angry or upset about something through silent treatments and withdrawing and acting out angrily or violent, or just psychologically confusing. Someone may become conflict avoidant on the basis that they've had a lot of conflict growing up or in their past or for a long length of time. And it's so important in these situations for both people involved to be empathetic towards one another, because nobody wants to be feeling like they're in conflict with someone constantly. The best thing to do is resolve it there and then, because otherwise it just snowballs and it becomes uncontrollable. And that's when people start to give up, when really the solution was there the whole time. It probably would have taken like 5-10 minutes to just sit down and have a chat about it. I understand that that's not always possible to be empathetic straight there on the spot in situations like that. And sometimes you just have to look back on your personal boundaries and realise that you need to walk away because you've pushed yourself too far past like your line of morality that you want to stick to, and that's how you are. But yeah, basically that's passive aggression as a whole. I don't really know fucking loads about it, but there's a bit of education on it, I suppose. Use it as you will. It is important, if you have related to like some of the points of passive aggression, that you really look within yourself and try and resolve those problems, because it might make you then a happier person and feel more confident even just in everyday communication, feeling like you can then truly reach this level of emotional maturity where it's like, nothing can hurt me because I can resolve everything, or I can walk away and set a personal boundary. And that is literally the best thing ever. If you're gonna do something, at least think about the other person involved, just for like a little bit. Think about how you're going to communicate things. That's really important. Like, communication is literally so important. So important. I am really high because I've just been waffling on 10 tons of shit. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, give myself a pat on the back for that. If you didn't enjoy it, that's not my problem and it can't hurt me. I can't be entertaining to everybody and I can't please everybody. And that's perfectly okay. So yeah, I'm gonna end this now. I'm gonna sit down on the sofa. I'm gonna chill the fuck out. In a bizzle.